I know you've seen the reels on social media. You know the one, some influencer walking down the grocery store aisle, calling out toxic foods, demonizing chemicals, and telling us to toss anything that we can't pronounce. And you know what? We're not the only ones seeing it. Our patients see this too, and they're bringing those fears and questions to you. But is there any truth to these claims? Or is this just another round of fear-based nutrition misinformation? Well, today, my friend, we're clearing the air. I'm Colleen, a PA, dietitian, and your nutrition mentor. Welcome to the Exam Room Nutrition Podcast, your guide to giving better nutrition advice. I am thrilled to bring back to the podcast Barbie Boules. She's a registered dietitian with a deep understanding of nutrition science. And she is back by popular demand because her last episode with me was my most downloaded episode of all time. So to say that you're in for a treat is a massive understatement. Barbie is here to help me dissect the latest food fears, from chemicals in our groceries to hormone myths, cortisol hype, and whether your patients really need a continuous glucose monitor if they don't have diabetes. So in this episode, we're tackling the truth behind the toxic food claims and what your patients need to know, why your patients' social media feed might be fueling their food anxiety, and how to guide patients away from nutrition fear-mongering and find credible nutrition sources online. Plus, we'll dive into what providers should actually focus on for midlife women, which goes beyond weight loss so that they can see real health improvements and feel their best. I am so excited for you to listen to our conversation, so grab your coffee and let's get into it. Well, it is an absolute thrill and honor to have you back on my show, Barbie. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Okay, like we said off air, and I just want to say this so it's on this episode. Our previous episode that we had done, it's actually episode 11 for those of you who would like to take a listen to that. And we covered all things perimenopause, about cholesterol and cortisol and things like that. So if you want to check that out, go listen to episode 11 after this. But I had told Barbie that it is my top listened to episode of all times. So you guys are in for a real treat because Barbie is such a great educator and she's just so on top of the latest nutrition trends and the nutrition science. So today's going to be a fantastic episode. And so I just want to discuss some buzzwords. So let's start out with the term toxic food. And I'd love to hear what your stance is on using that term.
Toxic in relationship to food is really an inappropriate term. Anything can be toxic at certain levels, and most of what's in the food supply, if we're eating it in reasonable quantities, we don't need to worry about it causing significant harm. It's really the cumulative effect. But, for example, water toxicity can happen, and water is something we definitely want to be getting enough of. So what we really have to wrap our heads around and embrace is that the dose makes the poison. So anything in excess, or if we're not getting enough of something, it can be problematic. But when we hear people talking on social media and using terms like toxic, it's an immediate red flag that they don't understand nutrition science, they don't understand the nuance, and they don't understand how nutrition impacts human health.
So well said. And it's so loud over there on Instagram. I've actually backed off a little bit, even just from my personal scrolling, just because it seems as though every nutrition experts, and I put that in quotes because they're not dietitians, they don't have a PhD in nutrition, are just spewing so much misinformation and fear-mongering so many different topics. And I think labeling a lot of foods as toxic, as they're walking through the grocery store aisles is just comical and frustrating, honestly, at this point.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who is standing in a grocery store saying anything, again, swipe on by. It's a tactic. It's a cliche at this point, and it's absurd. They generally are not telling you anything that you need to know.
Yes, exactly. And share that point with your patients because your patients are on social media. And so if they come to you asking this, really ask them, where did they get this information? Where did you hear it from? Make sure you do your research on who your patients are listening to because they need to have those credentials.
If you have no idea who to follow, who to listen to, you're really just at ground zero with that. While I would love to say, just look for dietitians, I can't say that because unfortunately I have seen some dietitians, kind of repeating some misinformation. although that is not the norm. I would start with someone who has a PhD in nutrition science, not a PhD of any kind, but a PhD in nutrition science, because these are people who are specifically trained to read research, understand it, understand its limitations and its nuance, and start there. And then certainly there are a lot of RDs, you and I included, who are really skilled at deciphering quality information.
Yes, fantastic point. And you can kind of follow who they follow or even like interact with the pages that they interact with, because traditionally, like you follow fantastic medical doctors. And we know that just because someone has an MD behind their name doesn't also mean that they are credentialed to give nutrition advice as well. So once you find someone like that, like you had suggested, then you can kind of trickle down and see who they're following and what pages that they interact with. I think that's a really good piece of advice. Okay, so we were talking about the people in the grocery stores, and one common thing, and it's a real I see daily, is they'll pull a bag of chips or a drink, God only knows, any food that's on the shelves. They'll show you the ingredients and they'll label these things as chemicals in these foods and say that it's bad. So can you just break down that terminology and if it's, quote, a bad thing to have chemicals in food?
Yeah, this is another red flag. If anyone is calling out chemicals, it's just an immediate indication that they don't know what they're talking about. You are chemicals. I am chemicals. The human body is made up of chemicals. Water is chemicals. I mean, everything that we interact with and are is made up of chemicals. You know, chemicals is sort of a scary term, even though it shouldn't be, because that's just what everything on the planet is made up of. So we don't need to worry about chemicals. Again, going back to the first point about toxicity, it is the dose of anything that we want to be mindful about. Too much sugar, too much saturated fat, too much sodium. You know, these are the things we really want to be looking out for. The amount of colorings and preservatives and other ingredients that we may not be able to recognize. Usually the amounts of these things in these foods is so minuscule. What we really want to be looking at is about the big levers for our health in terms of nutrition. Again, saturated fat, added sugar, not natural sugar that comes from lactose or in fruit. And then sodium. Sodium is something that it doesn't get talked about enough. And it really is something that we want to be more mindful about. And then overall calories, because it really is not any one component of these calories that can be problematic. Calories in excess in general can be problematic.
Now, what would you say for someone who's saying, if you can't pronounce one of the ingredients on the ingredients list, put it back on the shelf? What's your opinion about that kind of guidance or direction?
Yeah, that's absurd, because if you look at the chemical breakdown of a strawberry, it's going to have words that you don't recognize. So that's ridiculous. As is sticking to the perimeter of the grocery store. Think like little cliches like that are silly, because things like beans and whole grains and, canned vegetables and frozen vegetables, all of that's in the middle of the store. And all of that is really great. There are a lot of silly sort of, like I was saying, cliches out there that we don't need to worry about. But yeah, if you can't pronounce it, or if your grandmother didn't have it in her kitchen, I mean, all of that is just no.
Yep. That's another one. You're right. I forgot about the grandma. If grandma didn't have it. So the other thing that I just love about you and your approach to nutrition is, although it is a complex science, you actually simplify it and you kind of break down all the noise for your clients, and you make it easier for them to focus, like you were saying, decrease your added sugars. Let's decrease our sodium intake, our saturated fat intake. And so I want to shift our conversation now to weight loss, quote, hacks. There's tons of them on social media. So I want to pull out a few hot topics that I've seen and that you have addressed on your social media page. So the first one is, how much do hormones actually matter for women, especially, and managing their weight?
So hormones matter in the sense that they can impact your appetite, your sleep quality, which can then impact your insulin sensitivity and appetite, your energy for exercise, your appetite overall, where you store fat, with perimenopause and menopause, with the decline in estrogen, fat redistributes to the belly area. So certainly hormones play a role, but what we cannot say is that you can't lose fat because your hormones are, quote, imbalanced. That is a fallacy. All of the same rules apply even in conditions like PCOS, insulin resistance, and perimenopause. In order to lose fat, we need to create a sustainable calorie deficit. Ideally, we're also exercising to improve our health. Ideally, we're also including nutrient dense foods to improve our health. But when it comes to just making the scale move in a downward direction, the only thing that's required is a calorie deficit. Simply creating a balance of energy where you are burning more calories than you're consuming. So it's a nuanced topic in that I don't want to say they don't matter at all, but your hormones are not preventing you from losing weight. They're creating an environment where it's more challenging. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think you had said this phrase that is passed around on social media a lot. And it's where practitioners, and it's not always dietitians, they are promoting that they can quote balance or heal, your hormones. And so what's your opinion on that? Is that just kind of like a trigger word to get people to buy their course or their supplement or whatever they're selling?
Yeah, hormone balancing, hormone healing, hormone reset, all of those terms are just marketing terms. They don't really mean anything. What hormones are we talking about? I mean, there are a lot of different hormones we could potentially be talking about. And certainly there isn't a diet that will quote balance your hormones. And again, I don't even know what they mean. What are we talking about? Cortisol, insulin, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, who knows? So it really is just a marketing term to get your attention. Everyone likes the idea of sort of perfectly calibrating their hormones and feeling amazing, but that just isn't how it works. And generally, either these programs who are using that term are doing one of two things. They are either trying to sell you something that doesn't work, like expensive supplements or some weird protocols or Dutch tests or various other, sundry things that they can make money off of, or they're really just giving you very basic advice, valid, accurate advice, but it's nothing special. It's sleep well, eat well, exercise, and manage your stress, so it really is just a term to get your attention. There isn't a diet that is going to balance your hormones.
Yeah, it's all about marketing, right?
It is, but it's a popular one for sure. Everything is about hormones right now.
Mm-hmm. Speaking about that, there's a big hype on social media about cortisol, and especially with exercise. But I'm just curious if you can explain for maybe those people who have no idea, like what is this hype about cortisol and what should their female patients know?
Sure. So we're all really stressed out, right? And so anything that is going to help make us think that someone has a solution to feeling better or, in the midst of all this stress or reducing our stress, we're going to pay attention to. That's going to get our attention. And cortisol is a stress hormone. So it is increased in times of acute stress, and it can stay at sort of dysfunctional or irregular levels when we experience chronic stress. That said, cortisol is an essential hormone. It's what wakes us up in the morning. It serves a lot of very healthy functions. So it's not like we want to deplete our cortisol. Cortisol rises in the morning to help us wake up. And ideally, it sort of starts to taper off during the day. Melatonin takes over so we can get a good night's sleep. In a lot of people, this sort of nice crossover between melatonin and cortisol is dysregulated. However, there isn't a supplement or a diet or an exercise protocol that is going to fix this. It's an overall lifestyle approach that largely has to do with you better managing your stress and prioritizing getting really good quality sleep. So waking up and going to bed at the same time every day, getting sunlight in the morning, dimming the lights in the evening, not eating too close to bedtime, not having caffeine 10 hours before bedtime, not drinking alcohol. There are all kinds of things that are really not sexy, but they are the solutions to kind of correcting any dysfunction in cortisol that you might be experiencing. The other thing is, a lot is made of like adrenal fatigue, which is not a medical term at all. And too much, I think, is made of cortisol itself. But again, really great marketing there. What you want to be doing is not specifically targeting your cortisol. You want to be targeting your overall stress levels.
And you said it right at the beginning. We are all stressed. It's just the day and age that we're in is very, very stressful. And there's a lot of food noise that I think is making it that much worse for people.
Right. It isn't that there's no solution, but we don't want to pick out cortisol as the thing to target. Target your whole life. It's harder, but it's effective.
Why do you think this is so attractive to people who are looking for a solution, though? I mean, those people are making more money than I am. They're making thousands and thousands of dollars off of desperation. Why do you think we as a society are drawn to those types of solutions as opposed to like what you said, simple but not sexy things?
Because we want to feel better. And we are in a day and age, and have been for a long time, of instant gratification. It's because we're so busy, we're so stressed, our attention is so divided. It's very hard to consistently, on a daily basis for most people, get good quality sleep, get exercise, eat nutrient dense foods, and do things on a daily basis to manage their stress. I don't mean to be critical, because I'm not, because I feel this way too, but it would be great to take a pill. I mean, who doesn't love the promise of that? Who doesn't love the promise of some cortisol supplement that's going to solve all my problems? So of course it's attractive to get a quick fix. The problem is the sexy quick fixes, they don't work or they don't last. And we really have to take a much more big picture, holistic approach to our health. And it's hard work, but when we put in the work, that's when we reap the reward. But it's attractive because we want to feel better. And who can blame us for that, right?
Oh yeah. No, exactly. I mean, we all want to feel better faster, right? Like putting in the work in a year, it's like in a year you might, get to your dream weight or sleep better or feel more confident. And that feels like just forever. It feels like it's so far away that it's hard to stay on task and focused on your goals when it seems like that end goal is just impossible.
Totally. And I mean, I am not mad at the people buying the supplements. I'm mad at the people who are taking advantage of us and selling the supplements.
Yeah.
Because either they know better and they're being purposefully manipulative to sell a product, or they don't know better, which is equally dangerous. So
yeah, exactly.
We have to do the hard work,
And find professionals like yourself to come alongside our patients who can help them do the hard work, because we can't do it alone, right?
And, in that regard, nutrition is interesting because everybody eats food, right? And everybody kind of understands what's generally good for you. And so kind of everybody thinks they can do nutrition. I would never dream that I could do neurosurgery. You know what I mean? But kind of everybody thinks they can advise on nutrition. And that just isn't the case. There's so much nuance. If anybody is speaking in binary terms, black and white, always eat this, never eat this, it's an indication that they don't understand nutrition science.
Yeah. This frustrates me actually, is because like what you had just said, because we all eat, we all think that we're experts in nutrition, and it's so far from the truth. But that's where I think all of this misinformation and fear mongering among so many different things, I just feel like the last 3 years, the amount of wild nutrition concerns are unbelievable. Even just from like that grapes are a sugar bomb. And now we're all of the sudden, everybody is like freaking out about seed oils, which I don't even, like it's just all these things keep popping up. And it's exactly the reason, like you said, everybody eats. So everyone thinks that they are an expert and they see a dollar sign behind creating that fear of those foods.
Well, right. If you can create a problem and then sell the solution, you can make a lot of money. And if you can say that normal spikes in glucose after a meal is an issue, then they can sell a supplement to help correct that, when in fact that's not an issue. So,
yeah,
I mean, here we are. Thank you, social media.
I know. Well, thank God for people like you and me to debunk these myths and actually give truthful, factual information out there. And I'm really glad that you just went there with the glucose spikes, because I wanted to ask you about that. And if we need to be worrying about those glucose spikes, and your thoughts on continuous glucose monitors or CGMs for people without diabetes, because this is like a hot topic right now for people.
Sure. So if you do not have diagnosed insulin resistance, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, the normal trajectory of consuming food, an elevation in glucose, and it returning to baseline unless you eat again within 2 hours is a very normal occurrence. And it's not something we need to worry about. There's no evidence that a normal rise in glucose after a meal is inflammatory. However, obviously, if you have issues with glucose regulation, that's a different story, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people without glucose dysfunction. So in terms of CGMs, or continuous glucose monitors, I do not think they are necessary at all. I think they are kind of a $200 a month waste of time. However, one thing I will say is that I've had many clients who have used them. I have seen two different reactions to using CGMs. One is that someone became overly interested and obsessed with keeping their glucose flat, which was causing them to not eat enough fiber and to overconsume saturated fats and to not get enough calories in certain circumstances. This is not a result that we want. That is disordered eating. Then something else I've seen on the more positive side is women who have recognized that in a very stressful situation, their glucose goes up to, kind of higher than they would have expected. With no sleep, they react differently to a meal, the exact same meal, than when they had slept well. So these are things I have told them without them having to use, because we know these things in stressful situations, your blood floods with glucose. When you haven't had enough sleep, it reduces insulin sensitivity. But for these people, they needed to see it. They needed to see the data on themselves in order to believe it. And so in that sense, it did help them manage their stress better and prioritize healthy sleep. But hopefully we can just know that these are good things to do and not spend $200 a month on something that we wear on our bodies. Yeah. I think that the chances of someone just becoming obsessed about what their blood sugar is doing on a daily basis is just too risky. And I don't advise it at all, especially because there's no harm in that normal glucose spike.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that was my big fear with CGMs as well, is that it leads to obsession. And I think it is because we get that quick hit, we get that quick answer, so it almost like gamifies what you're eating, what you're putting in your body. And it's a lot like social media, right? You're getting that instant feedback. And that's really what our bodies do crave. And I agree with you 100% that it can absolutely lead to disordered eating and obsession with those numbers when it's not necessary.
The other thing I want to highlight about CGMs, and this is, they are important and they are more convenient for people with type 2 diabetes than other than finger pricks and so on. So for them, very appropriate and should be used. The thing about CGMs is that they measure glucose in interstitial fluid, not blood. So the accuracy isn't quite the same as if you were to prick your finger. So again, it's just sort of another layer of what are we really looking at? I'm not saying they're inaccurate. I'm just saying it's just not worth it.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Use those $200 and go buy more fruits and veggies and beans to fill up your pantry.
Fruits, veggies, right. A really good quality pillow.
Yes.
So many things you could do with that $200.
Okay, I want to lead into your wheelhouse essentially, and that is women in perimenopause, menopause, and really the things that we can suggest as a provider for that patient sitting in front of us who wants weight loss. What are some things that a provider can suggest to that patient to focus on?
So what I always recommend to providers who have 15 minutes with people, there's a lot more you can say, but what I would lead with, because it is so crucial, not just for fat loss, healthy body composition, better metabolic health, particularly glucose regulation, instead of immediately going to lose weight, go to gain muscle. Get out there and gain some muscle. Start eating enough protein. And you can give them the figure of 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram of ideal body weight for protein to shoot for in a day, unless they are really far away from their ideal body weight, in which case I would split the difference. So for example, if somebody really ideally would be 150 pounds, but they're 200 pounds, aim for 175. And then, so enough protein to be the substrate for building muscle, and then get out there and build muscle. That is the very top of the line, and really push that hard, because that will build better habits. They'll start feeling better and stronger. They'll have more energy. Their glucose regulation will be better. So their insulin sensitivity will be better. And that really is the important thing. The number on the scale, this is the other really important thing for perimenopausal women in particular. BMI it's not particularly relevant to begin with, lots of problems with BMI, but especially for perimenopausal women. Because of this acceleration in the loss of muscle mass, we might stay the same weight, but we're losing muscle. It's being replaced with fat unless we are pushing against it with building muscle mass. So if you're just doing BMI with someone and you're not understanding what their body composition looks like, you might say, oh, all good, when in fact, they could be setting themselves up for insulin resistance and excess visceral fat and inflammation and so on. So I really advise doctors to, this isn't the easiest thing to do, but invest in a bioelectrical impedance scale. It's not perfect, but at least they can get a gauge and notice trends in their patients. That's again, with 15-minute medicine, there are lots of things I could say to your question, but with appointments being what they are, that's what I would say.
What are a few other things that you find that women in this stage struggle with regards to eating?
Yeah, so these changes in hormones really can increase appetite. And so there's that. We just are compelled to eat more. And sometimes we don't even realize it. And this is something I've found very frequently over the last, 20 plus 25 years of doing this. Very often people will say, I'm not eating more. But in fact, they are eating 300, 400, 500 calories more in a day than perhaps they were a year ago. The issue is they're matching their appetite. Does that make sense? So it's like their appetite has increased. So therefore their eating has increased. But because they're just matching their appetite, they don't realize that they don't feel like they're overeating. They're just eating when they're hungry. So it can be a good idea initially if you're really struggling and it's not making sense to you why you've gained, 10, 15 pounds, to track as long as you don't have any contraindications like a history of eating disorder. The app I really like for this is Chronometer, Cronometer. I really like their free version. Lots of great information, including micronutrients, which you don't always see. So I would say track and see how you're doing. And then sweet cravings, they definitely increase. So having things on hand, like I have a ton of frozen fruit in my freezer and I just whip up a smoothie when I'm feeling that craving. Having things on hand that will satisfy that craving that are very nutrient dense and lower calorie than, a crumble cookie, say, for example.
Right. Yes, exactly. I really like, and I did not know that Chronometer has micronutrients included in there. And I think that is a golden missing piece to a lot of nutrition programs, especially not done by a dietitian, because we are so weight focused. We're so calorie and protein focused. I think a lot of patients are missing out on those micronutrients that they can get from fruits and veggies and fiber and things like that. So I think that's fascinating and very interesting that it has that. You had mentioned this when we were talking about what we should focus on for women in perimenopause, menopause. And I wanted to linger here and kind of use this as my last question is, what other things beyond the patient's weight or really the goal of weight loss should women in this phase prioritize or that we can really focus on for them?
We want to create a healthy body composition for reasons well beyond the aesthetic. We all want to look good. Aesthetic goals are great, but if we really want to live long, happy, healthy lives, we need to have a healthy body composition to get us around and to manage our metabolic health. So it's not just about losing fat. It's also about gaining muscle. We also need to be prioritizing sleep and stress management, both of which can lead to weight gain, increased appetite, increased stress eating, so we want to be, again, looking at our picture holistically. It's nutrition, it's sleep, it's exercise, it's managing stress. And something else I really think is very important for women, and it's something I talk about in my membership a lot, is knowing your numbers. If you're a 50-year-old woman, you may have had the same doctor for the last 20 years. You have new needs. And if this doctor is not up to date on the menopause transition and the fact that this is a whole body event, this is endocrine, this is neurological, this is musculoskeletal, this is cardiometabolic, this is an immune system, changes. So if your doctor is not up to date on that and thinks it's just sort of being uncomfortably hot, and your period stopping, then it might be time for a change to somebody who is really going to work with you on optimizing your metabolic markers, not just giving you a pass just because you aren't yet at a point where you need medication. That was a lot, but I feel very strongly about it.
I think that is such an important piece, especially for providers to think about. And like, don't be too proud. It's okay if you are not the expert in menopause. I personally am not. I'm in pediatrics. I'm at the whole other end of the spectrum. And
Right.
so I think if you're realizing and you have a patient in front of you who is maybe they're struggling with their weight, their labs are borderline, not enough for medication, but you're not quite sure how to help them, it is perfectly fine to find someone who does specialize in menopause and refer them to them and transition care that way.
Absolutely. It's so important. And to have something else I would really recommend to providers. I know they're busy and they have no time and they're stressed and burned out themselves, but this might help is having resources available to your patients, having a mental health professional, a dietitian, a cardiologist, a menopause specialist, an endocrinologist, whoever you can refer out to makes you look better. Honestly, I would let I have a physician like that, and I deeply appreciate someone who is going to say, you know what, I don't know. Here's somebody who does,
Yes. Yep. It is really great care when you have enough confidence in yourself to say, you know what, I didn't learn about this, but I know someone who can help you, and your patient will appreciate you and honestly keep coming back to you because you gave them exactly the information that they needed or put them in contact with the person who could help them the best.
100%.
All right, Barbie, I'm so excited to hear about your new membership program that you're launching. So can you tell us about that and what it offers patients?
Sure. So thank you for asking. This is a online platform for midlife women to improve their cognitive fitness. So over the course of a year, we go through all of the different sort of pillars of brain health, cognitive fitness, nutrition, exercise, sleep, managing stress, building cognitive reserve, social connection, and finding purpose and joy. In addition to that, I have a subscription for monthly meal plans and strategy because I think, there are a bazillion recipes and meal plans all over the place. But what this is really about is helping women create strategy to make it very easy to follow a brain healthy eating pattern. So yeah, that launches in January and I'm really excited about it and can't wait to get it started.
Oh my gosh, this is going to be so great for so many women. It's so needed. And it sounds like it's going to be a great community as well. So where can people sign up or where can they refer their patients to for more information?
So just going to my website, barbieboules.com, BARBIEBOULES, it's all there. And I have purposefully tried to keep it as affordable as possible because one of the reasons I transitioned out of one-on-one work to this platform is a desire to make this information so much more affordable and accessible to so many more women because I really genuinely want to be a part of changing the future of women's brain health because the trajectory we're on is dismal. And I really want to help change that.
I feel your passion literally through the camera. And I know you've put your heart and soul in this. And I'm just so excited for this program because I know it's going to help so many women and you will change the trajectory of our future. So I'm grateful for you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm grateful to you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Barbie, where can people hang out with you on social media?
I am the cognition dietitian with a T, not a C, on, on Instagram. And I'm as active as I can be, providing all the kinds of information we just talked about, women's metabolic health and brain health.
Your page is full of information, so you guys definitely go check her out. And I am at Examiner Nutrition on Instagram. So Barbie, thank you so much for the gift of your time. I'm just so honored that you were able to come back. Thanks for all the information you provided us today.
Thank you so much, Colleen.
All right, now it's time for my nutrition notes. So when it comes to weight loss, we often tell patients to be consistent. We hear quotes like, without commitment, you'll never start. But more importantly, without consistency, you'll never finish. Or maybe you have a motivational poster on your wall that says long-term consistency trumps short-term intensity. And while those are aesthetic and maybe motivating, when your patient is struggling, telling them to be consistent isn't really helpful. They don't need more discipline. They don't need more motivation. What they need is more adaptability. Now, I love a good James Clear quote. And as he says, adaptability is the way of consistency. Patients don't need more discipline. They need ways to adjust when life gets messy. So here are 3 strategies to help your patients stay on track. Number 1, the 5-minute rule. When motivation is low, ask your patient, what is the 5-minute version of this task? For example, a 45-minute workout might feel impossible on those busy weeknights, but maybe they could start with a 5-minute walk. That's doable. Those small wins will build momentum to eventually get them to a point where they can confidently and consistently do a 45-minute workout. The second strategy is called the if-then plan. Help your patients create a backup plan. This will help them keep moving forward even when their plan A fails. So for example, maybe they strategize and say, if I can't meal prep on a Sunday, then I'll pick up a rotisserie chicken and pre-chopped vegetables. This way, their dieting plan is not totally derailed due to their inability to meal prep that day. And lastly, shrink the change. Big goals feel very overwhelming. So I would encourage your patients to focus on one small shift. So instead of wanting to, quote, eat healthier, maybe they start with one meal. Suggest they add a protein source to breakfast, or maybe they focus on drinking water only on the weekends. These small tweaks will lead to lasting results and build momentum. Now, if you like tips like this and you're really into behavior change so that you can help your patients toward making healthy habits, you will love episode 67. So go listen to that one when this one ends. It's titled, Is Your Patient Non-Compliant or Just Struggling? It's a really, really practical episode full of tips and tricks that you can use today with your patient to help them make change as easy and stress-free as possible. Because we know that behavior change is so complicated. It requires a person to disrupt a current habit while simultaneously fostering a new, unfamiliar set of actions. So go check out episode 67 when this one is done. I promise you, you will love it. Now remember, weight loss is not about perfection. It's about finding a way to show up no matter what. So today, think about ways that you can help your patient adapt to stay on track. Now, if you've loved this episode, tell me about it in the Apple Podcast app by leaving me a review or shoot me a DM on Instagram at Exam Room Nutrition. And as always, let's continue to make our patients healthier, one exam room at a time. I'll see you next time.